And fresh off his trip to the Middle East, President Trump is set to host Ukraine's President Zelenskyy this week at the White House. Zelensky's planning to ask about long-range weapons to help keep pressure on Russia. Last night, Trump warned Russia he may send long-range missiles to Ukraine if Russia doesn't end the war. Now he's expected to meet with Zelenskyy on Friday. ABC's Patrick Reevell has more on that from our London bureau. So, Patrick, what more do we know about Zelensky's trip to the U.S. and what he's planning while he's here?
Hi, Dan. Yeah, fresh off President Trump's success in the Middle East, he's now going to host President Zelenskyy of Ukraine in Washington on Friday. We know that a large Ukrainian delegation led by Ukraine's Prime Minister and Zelenskyy's Chief of Staff has already arrived in Washington, is having meetings today discussing how to basically bolster Ukraine and put more pressure on Russia. And I think this could be a very important meeting because it has the potential to help cement a major shift in how President Trump has been trying to end the war in Ukraine. And that shift is to basically now stop trying to reach out to Russia, but instead put more pressure on it by bolstering Ukraine. And we know that top of the agenda of this meeting is going to be the question of providing Tomahawk cruise missiles. And if President Trump were to provide that to Ukraine, that would be a major shift. Tomahawks have vastly more range than the types of missiles that the U.S. has previously provided to Ukraine. It would be a major shift, and we know that the Kremlin would be very worried by it. That's why we're seeing Russian officials right now put out unusually strong warnings that they don't want to see it. But I think it's clear that President Trump hopes that by threatening to provide Tomahawks, he can use it as leverage to pressure Vladimir Putin into actually finally going for a deal. We also know that President Zelenskyy will be discussing a potentially $90 billion deal that would see Ukraine buy U.S. weapons for using European money. But I think in general, the most important thing here that we're seeing is that President Trump appears to be losing patience with Vladimir Putin finally, as he is showing no sign of wanting to end this war. Instead, might finally be turning instead to bolstering Ukraine, Diane.
Now, Russia is also increasing its attacks on Ukraine's energy system. How is Ukraine working to protect those ahead of winter?
Yeah, Diane, we have seen in the past month, really, Russia dramatically increase its attacks on Ukraine's energy infrastructure. Last week, again, we saw one of the biggest attacks on its energy infrastructure of the war. We've seen already that in some regions there are blackouts, sometimes for several hours, including in Kyiv. We've seen sometimes blackouts being inflicted. And just today, there was a powerful Russian attack on Kharkiv in the east. A number of powerful glide bombs were dropped there, including around a hospital, causing significant damage and injuring at least 50 people. But in general, Ukraine, as Russia has been increasing its attacks, has been struggling to fend them off because simply there are more Russian drones and missiles being launched against the country. And so there is generally an expectation that this winter we will see things get harder for Ukraine and more blackouts, Diane.
All right, Patrick Reevell for us from London. Thank you.